Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all doing good. We are doing something in this video I have never done before and you've never seen it on Claire's Crafty Corner. A few videos back, some of you will remember I made a huge batch of silicone inlays. They came out stunning. I used a Taro maxi mold, some silicone rubber, and I made this absolutely beautiful fortune-telling crystal ball. Now, be prepared to be entertained in this video. We are doing something wow, and definitely stick around to see how this turns out. At the time I made that video, I said to you all, I don't have a mold deep enough for this, and I'm pretty sure it was one of my friends here on YouTube that said, Claire, what about that mold that you've got from Moulds and Shapes? And I was like, see, this is why I need you guys, because it really helps me remember what I've got. And I grabbed the mold. It was perfect. It fit this beautiful fortune-telling silicone inlay like a dream. And here we are. We are going for it. We are doing something I've never done before. I cannot wait for you to see. First up, I'm giving the mold a quick clean. There were multiple ways to use this inlay. We could go down the standard chameleon powder route. We could fill that crystal ball section with glitters and sequins and sparkles, keep it dry in there. The third way, the way we are doing today in this video, we are making a liquid potion, like a gorgeous, pearlescent, sparkly liquid potion that is going to remain liquid as a shaker. I've never done this before. I actually asked my patrons over on my Patreon page, what do I do, guys? And I'm not gonna lie, I was fearful. My inner my inner kind of fear of not being able to do this. Most of my patrons said, go for the potion liquid. Go for the liquid, have a go. And I was like, I was so scared you were all gonna say that. And here we are. We're gonna go for it. So thank you so much to my patrons for helping me make that decision. Quite often I'll ask my patrons a question and the majority rules. So whatever my patrons tell me to do, I will do it. Like even if it's a color scheme or a particular background color, I will do it. So here I am. We're going for it. First up, we are laying down a clear layer of resin in this mold in order to be able to lay my inlay. But here's the thing. This resin I've just poured into this mold was left over from another project. Now, this resin has been sitting there for about 10 minutes. And firstly, I thought that's great because it's going to be nice and warm and that's going to get rid of air bubbles. The last thing I wanted was air bubbles, so I figured it would be fine. It would be fine. We'll just lay the inlay down into this resin and it will work perfectly because air bubbles be gone. You know, it's so warm at this point. My biggest worry for this inlay is it's so intricately stunning. There's so much detail in the base of this that I was worried it would trap loads of air and I wouldn't necessarily get the results I was really looking for. I'm looking for crystal clarity. So I did decide to pick up some resin from the silicone mold and coat the base just because it's just so beautiful and intricate. Lots of little nooks and crannies. But immediately I realized the inlay was not floating. Now, when you use silicone inlays, they float. It's not floating because I don't have enough resin in the mold. So I lifted it out, I poured more resin, and as soon as I dropped it back in, I could see that it was floating. This was perfect. This was what I wanted. However, I made up more resin in order to do this. That resin was pretty cold. It didn't really have time to warm up. I was just eager to get this done. So the very next day when it was time to demold, immediately I thought, wow, this is so beautiful, as I always do when I pull back an inlay. The detail in the resin was a wow. It had picked up every little bit of that base. However, I didn't put any resin on the actual crystal ball element of the inlay. And what happened was it created a whole world of micro bubbles that attached themselves to that crystal ball section. You might like it. That's not the effect I was going for. So I did actually demold it. How gorgeous is this? Just on its own, I demolded it, but it wasn't good enough for me, so I decided to go again. I'm going to keep that one anyway because I think it's stunning on its own. I just think it's quite incredible, the detail that you can get from a crystal clear resin with an inlay, like no colours added. Okay, we're going again. This time around, this is fresh resin. I have been sitting my resin bottles in a hot water bath to get as liquid as possible, to eliminate as many air bubbles as possible. I really wanted this to be crystal clear. Now, the reason my resin has got a lot of air bubbles in is because my craft room gets incredibly cold overnight. So at the moment, with it being a lot colder, I am having to put my resin in a lot of hot baths before I use it. You can use heat mats, you can use heat guns. All of these things will eliminate and diminish air bubbles. The resin itself is actually a beautifully crystal clear resin, but it's the freezing cold air that does not help because it actually thickens it up. This time around, I have used my heat gun. My resin is crystal clear. Like, it's about as crystal clear as you're ever going to get. I've coated my entire silicone inlay in the resin just to support that, you know, to not have any air bubbles cling to the surface of the silicone, which really can happen quite a lot. At this point, I needed to fill up the mold until my inlay was floating. You can see it there. It just drifted off to the left-hand side. That's what you want. You want your silicone inlay to be floating on the surface of your resin. And this silicone inlay, you will have all seen it. The crystal ball element is fatter, chunkier, and deeper than the base. So of course it was kind of like resting on an angle. It was almost like wonky. So just make sure it is floating when done. This was the next day. We peeled it out and perfection. Crystal clear in every way. And this is when I got excited. This is when I thought, oh, this is going to work. Now, if you remember that giant sugar skull tray that I've just made, I had a load of spill off in that video. I told you I was going to save it all. We can use it. I'm using the spill off to create a dam for my piece. Now, the reason I want to create a dam in this particular area is because the base of this crystal ball is going to be solid resin. However, the actual round crystal ball section is going to be a liquid. They cannot mix. They absolutely cannot. So I used the silicone inlay that I made to draw on my spill off with a permanent marker, just to cut around. It took me a few attempts. I'm not going to pretend this was a really quick, easy thing. It took me a few attempts to get exactly the right shape, the right roundness that I needed to be able to place down in between the base and the top glass part to create my dam. And I just then used UV resin on a micro brush to brush all around the edge of that dam, which of course is just epoxy resin spill off. You can use other things. You can use acetate, or you can put a sheet of laminate through your laminator, laminate it, use that. I just have it, so I might as well use it. I then used extra UV resin to reinforce it, to keep it in place. You could of course use anything you have, super glue or anything that really works for you. For me, I just felt like UV resin was easy and I could just get it in there. Making sure that when I pour the epoxy resin into the base, it's not going to pour into the crystal ball section. Now at this point, I'm so happy. Like, I am so happy at this stage. It is looking amazing. We won't really see all that mess once all the resin's in there, and it is good and everything is working. And guys, I cannot tell you how happy I was. I was giddy with excitement. Now here I am brushing chameleon powder into the base of the crystal ball. This is going to make it pop. This is going to look incredible. And then I'm filling the back with black. This is black epoxy resin. At this stage, at the point of filming this part of the video, I had no black polyurethane left at all. It would have been really handy to have because that sets so fast. I wouldn't have been so worried about any leakages or any of it seeping through into the glass ball section. But guys, it didn't. we had huge success here. I was so happy. You know, sometimes I'm so intimidated by an idea, it puts me off trying it. And trust me, there are loads of things I still want to try, but I'm intimidated and I'm scared of failure. I'm scared of it not working. And I was just so happy and proud that I even got this far. Now for the crystal ball. Glycerin. I watched multiple videos on YouTube to be able to do this on potion liquid recipes. So many of them recommended glycerin, loads recommended alcohol, isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol, and honestly the results I preferred were from the alcohol. So again, there's multiple videos on YouTube, literally hundreds, on how to make, you know, Halloween apothecary bottle potion liquid that has that amazing shimmer. Even now you can buy alcohol in the shops that actually when you shake the bottle, it looks like this cloudy, beautiful shimmer of gorgeousness. That is what I wanted. Now, I've poured my isopropyl alcohol into the cup. I've added red alcohol ink. You can see that there. I've mixed it in. Next up, it's time to add your mica. So into another cup, I've poured some more alcohol and I've poured some mica. I feel like in hindsight, I should have put more in, but I put in some mica. This is going to give us this wispy, cloudy, stunning result. And I was already obsessed thinking, now I need to do potion bottles, like actual potion bottles. I added in a little bit of the super sparkle white. And if you've got any like glitter dust or anything like that, add that in, you know, do all of the things, make it as potion-y as you possibly can. Now it's time to fill up the crystal ball. Before we do that, we need to block it off. Now, again, this is all of the resin spill off that I got from my giant skull tray. I used my silicone inlay to draw around the glass dome with a permanent marker, thin-tipped permanent marker. I drew around it on to my epoxy resin spill off and I cut it out to size. This was easier. This was easier than creating the dam, honestly. And that is what is going to stop our alcohol getting into the rest of the piece. I used my jewellery drill to drill a hole right in the corner. This is where we're going to be able to pour in our liquid. But first, we need to get this capped off and we need to stick it down and make sure that absolutely none of that liquid is going to be able to escape the crystal ball section. So I'm using a micro brush again with some UV resin. I am simply brushing the UV resin all around the outside edge of that resin spill off, I guess. What would you call it? A lid? Yeah, we could call it a lid. Again, you don't have to use resin spill off. You could use some plastic acrylic. You could use some plastic acetate. You could also use some laminate. If you throw just a blank sheet of laminate through your laminator, it will come out crystal clear at the other side. I'll be honest, it didn't even need to be crystal clear. It could be anything because we're not going to see it. The background is going to be coloured in. And of course, the liquid is going to be hiding whatever you used. So actually, it doesn't need to be crystal clear. Just use anything that's solid enough and completely and utterly, of course, waterproof and resin proof to be able to cap off. And that was it. Once I'd put all of the UV resin around the outside edge of this cap, it was time to hit it with my UV light. And then I left that UV light on for 5 minutes. And yeah, I don't know why, but my lead got caught up. So I had to pull it towards the light as opposed to the other way around. Once that was cured after 5 minutes, I decided to reinforce all of those edges. I didn't want to risk it. I didn't want to risk any of that alcohol potion liquid seeping out of here and into whatever it was I was going to put on the back. And again, I wasn't too worried about the mess. I'm just using UV resin to block all of this off. And I've already drilled my hole. You would have seen that. I'm going to be able to pour my liquid into that once the actual cap is on. You know, you've got to make sure that cap is on and there's absolutely no holes at all whatsoever. So next up, we are using a squeezy bottle with the shimmery, shiny potion liquid. And the squeezy bottle I have has got a very fine tip. I'm going to be able to place this tip down into that hole that I've drilled and fill up our crystal ball with the absolutely stunning shimmer powder, liquid potion stuff. What do you even call it? I then had to refill this bottle about 4 times in order to actually fill up this crystal ball element. It took a lot, like it took a lot more than I thought it was going to. But again, it's an easy job. Just fill your bottle up, just keep on squeezing it in there. It's not resin, it's not going to go off. You've got all the time in the world, and just carry on until your shaker section is completely and utterly filled. Now, I have watched so many shaker videos over the years, and they all use completely different things. You can use mineral oil, people have used baby oil. Of course, you've got that glycerin. The glycerin is like it just thickens up whatever it is, and if there's anything floating around in there like glitter and snow globe, for example, they would use a product like glycerin so that the snow doesn't immediately just drop. It actually floats around in the liquid for a while, and it basically makes the liquid thicker. So many options. So definitely research and do the option that you think is best for you. Once I had filled up with my liquid, I placed a blob of UV resin over the hole that I drilled, and I capped it off. We now know that absolutely none of that liquid can come out. I've shaken it, it's not moving, we have capped it off, and that liquid is well and truly encapsulated within the resin. Next up, I decided to get fancy schmancy and have a play. I've never done this before. I poured UV resin over the entire back of the piece to create this polyurethane fabric technique, and placed it under the UV light for 5 minutes. I did it for another 5 minutes, and guys, it came out incredible. Now, I have not got much room left in this mold. In order for the inlay to float, it filled up the mold. So I've got nowhere to go, and I have to work out how to do the back. This is where it all took a turn. Oh, have you got popcorn ready, guys? On first glance, I knew I would dust the back, I would use black, and it would all be okay. But then my hands were getting wet, and I couldn't understand why my hands were getting wet until I started pressing down on the top, and you can see it pouring out. It was pouring out. Little did I know that when I filled the silicone mold with resin and placed my silicone inlay down in that resin, that silicone inlay ended up touching the bottom of the mold. So when I filled it with my alcohol potion recipe, it just carried on seeping out and in to the silicone mold. And when I demolded it, it was pouring out. This is usually the point where I give up and I think, you know what, tried it, didn't work, I'll find a deeper mold, I'll just quit now and I'll try again another day. But no, I decided I would keep going. My plan was to double mold this. So I've done the polyurethane technique with the UV, that's worked a dream. Now we are backing that in chameleon powder. I've used a blob of UV resin to cap off where the alcohol was coming through from the crystal ball. I just put a blob of UV resin on there, like a plug. I basically plugged it with UV resin to stop any more alcohol coming out. I've brushed the whole of the back with chameleon. I'm using polyurethane in the back in the same mold, and I'm now putting some black polyurethane on the back of my piece. Now, the project has got so many different elements to it. This part of the project was a huge success. So I ran out of room in the mold. I didn't have any more room for any more resin. So I couldn't back this piece in the mold. But actually laying down some polyurethane in the mold, flipping this back and putting it back in the mold worked a dream. Like, it actually worked a dream. It was messy, yes. The edges weren't perfect, yes. However, it did work. We actually got much better results from this technique than I expected to. So I was really, really happy that I'd done this, we ended up with a super big chunky round block at the end, which I was definitely happy with. So whilst this video is lots of different elements, some elements were more successful than others, some not so. So you can see here I'm demolding. It did seep up and out around the sides, and that was fine. I used a cotton bud to run it round and clean up as much as possible so that when we do demold, we don't have any excess yuckiness all stuck around the edge. That worked great. You can see my UV resin blob on the top there, capping off where the crack was. But now we have a huge air bubble stuck inside. That was bugging me more than anything else. This is what the potion looks like in the bottle. This is what it looks like. But when it came to actually shaking my creation, shaking the actual creation wasn't showing me anything. It's like I couldn't see it. It was just, yeah, I don't know. I had to really look hard to be able to see through the resin what I could see in the plastic bottle. It wasn't giving me the exact results I wanted. But guys, I persevered. This was like 57 years later, okay? I kept going. I couldn't quit at this point. I just felt so strongly that I have to keep going. I have to see it through. I drilled another hole straight down through the surface of my resin, and I filled it with more of that potion liquid until I couldn't see any more air bubbles in there. And I capped it off with yet another UV blob. Right now, we've just got nothing but UV blobs on the top of this. And yeah, I sanded the entire piece down to be able to handle a top coat, and I was just needing that top coat to stick. The best thing about sanding resin and then top coating is it becomes a window into an underground world. It is absolutely stunning when you first lay down that top coat and you see the magic below. How incredible is that UV polyurethane? I mean, it has come out so cool. And the next day, are you crying with me? Have you got your popcorn because something went completely wrong overnight? Now listen, we've all heard of Amine blush. We've all had blush. I still get blush sometimes when temperatures plummet overnight. Did the temperatures plummet overnight in my craft room? They would have done, yes. However, I don't think this is all blush. I've never seen anything like this in my life. It looked like something out of a horror movie. I know it would be down to temperatures. The air bubble is back in the crystal ball. However, shaking it, I'm shaking it really quite hard, and you can see some of that shimmer. It is there. We can see it. But this top coat went so wrong. I honestly, I felt two emotions. I felt proud that I'd seen it through, and also like, why? Why? Again, this is the potion in the liquid bottle. The mica has a tendency to settle, but once you shake it up, it looks absolutely dreamy and wonderful and wispy and all of the things. But shaking my creation, again, I wasn't getting that result. Drilling so many holes and plugging it with UV resin, I'm thinking I could have maybe just plugged it with a piece of sellotape, but would the tape have reacted with the alcohol? I was also very, very proud that I'd tried something that petrified me, like absolutely petrified me. This top coat, I've got no words to describe this top coat apart from maybe you've sat in the sun too long and got the worst sunburn of your life and you've ended up in A&E. That's the only way I can describe the tightening, the surface of this. And it all seems to stem from those UV resin blobs. Can you see the way it's kind of like shooting away from those UV resin blobs? Did it have a reaction with the UV resin? Quite possibly. mix that in with the fact that temperatures plummeted overnight. However, that's happened to me before, and I've never, ever had this level of shock on a top coat ever. And I mean deep winters. I've had maybe a little bit of blushing on the top. This looks like it's been pulled away from all of the edges, and I put enough resin on for it not to do that. Plus I sanded. There's so many questions. This project has left me with more questions than answers. The biggest lesson learned here is to ensure that your mold is deep enough and your inlay does not sit on the bottom of the mold. That's it. Lesson number one. Most of these problems would not have occurred if my mold was deep enough. I couldn't pour any more resin in there because it was at the top. The resin was at the top. Lay down a clear bit of resin first, let that fully cure, then lay your resin down to lay your inlay in it, and then that will never happen. Like, that will just not be an issue. The silicone inlay will never, ever, ever come into contact with your silicone mold because you've already laid down a clear layer. Could I have done this? Could I have done that? I should have done this. Yes. Lots and lots of alternative things I could have done, but I didn't. And this was the first time I'd ever tried it. So guys, I needed to share this video with you because because you have to understand that, you know, I was so intimidated. I decided to try it. I had a go at it. I had a play. It did not work out at all. However, I have taken away so many positives from this video, so many elements that did work, that I am confident now that I'm going to be able to do this again in the future, and it will work. So I absolutely needed to share this with you. It's a very long video. I massively appreciate you all for staying, and yeah, the only way is up from here on in. The only way is up. So I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed the whole entire process of the perseverance to get that beautiful shriveled top coat at the end. So yeah, I will see you all in the next video. Let me know if you've done this. Let me know what your results were and tag me in your videos so I can watch them, please. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.